Good morning, folks, and welcome into the Hook'em Hoops podcast. No Zach Davis today, but me and Tommy are going to hold down the fort for y'all after a big couple days of Texas basketball. They walk into the Barclays Center and win the Legends Classic. Tommy, your initial thoughts after two wins in 2 days for the Longhorns?
Well, my initial thoughts is apologies to Zach because it's probably my fault that he's not here since we're recording this at the stroke of midnight.
Yeah.
This, so apologies, Zach. But shout out to Zach too because he got he just called the first game that his students called on albeit off air radio, but for Texas students at the University of Texas. So super proud of Zach and all the guys over there. Anyways, back to hoops. So starting with Syracuse, this is a game where I think first half you look at and you say, that's about what we'd expect from this Texas team when they're kind of firing on all cylinders. And then the second half is kind of where you've seen this team be the last couple of years, where it'll be looking really good and you feel really great at the halfway point, but they just don't get to the finish line cleanly. And I think you want to see them step on throats a little bit more because I don't know what to make of this Syracuse team just yet, but they've been very up and down. So, for me, you take a win. When I look at the box score, and I know this kind of translates both to the Syracuse game and the St. Joe's game. Folks, I think I said this when the season started. There are going to be games this year where Trey Johnson goes 4 of 18 and he goes 1 of 7 of
Yep.
3.
Yep.
And it's gonna be a struggle. It's gonna be a struggle. He's gonna take a bunch of shots. He's a high volume shooter. Eventually they will fall. And when they do fall, your jaw is going to be on the floor and you're going to be like, oh my God, this is like the best performance I've ever seen in my life. But with that comes these kinds of games. So the important X factor there is when you play like this, can you find a way to win? And Texas did that not once, but twice, really. So in the Syracuse game, it was Arthur Kaluma who stepped up big. I mean, he has really surprised me, Jason. He has really surprised me with how well he's playing. 16 and 10, and then four more in that game, too.
Yeah.
So not how about Kendall Weaver with a sneaky 9 rebounds in that Syracuse game too. So
He's a great
like I said,
rebounder.
yeah, he is a good rebounder. But good to see Texas win that game. Good to see Tremont Mark come into the lineup. I know that's going to be a ramp up process for him, but you take your wins. These are going to be things that you look back on in March, and you're thankful that you came out on the winning side of things.
I mean, they played two borderline NCAA tournament teams and they allowed 120 some points in two
Yep.
days. Like the defense looks insane right now, and they just got Tremont Mark back. I honestly, I know that I tend to be the more pessimistic of the three of us, but I don't have enough great things to say about the 2 days that Texas had in New York City. I mean, they looked fantastic. That Syracuse game is going to end up being great for them because they dominated in the first half. They honestly should have been up by double digits going into the break, and then they let the lead slip away, and they should have let the game slip away, but they didn't. They won. You know, in years past, Texas doesn't do that, and they won because they have guys like Trey Johnson who they can give the ball to late in the game, whether it be score a big ISO bucket, hit two free throws to ice the game. You know, they're in such a great spot with their late game strategy between the defense and some of these guys who can really ice the game. And then you look at the St. Joe's game, that was one that was really back and forth for the first 35 minutes, and then Texas pulled away and ended up winning and covering. And so, or they didn't cover actually, they only won by 9, but that's still a big win over a team that I think is going to be a contender in the A10 this year. So before we really get into the nitty gritty of each game, like I loved what I saw this week. I
Yep.
absolutely loved it. And you get Tremont Mark back, maybe something that people didn't expect given what we were told these first couple weeks of the season. Nick Cody plays like what? I was shocked to see that. It was like watching a ghost walk on the court. It was like, are you kidding me? I'm thrilled though. If Nick Cody's playing this year, it means he's in the rotation. So don't have enough good things to say. I'll get into them in a second. I want to ask you though, from the Syracuse game specifically, in the second half, the game's about to get away from Texas. What do you really think they showed by pulling out that win over a high major team?
Is that this team can finish now. I think when
Mm-hmm.
you look at years past, you think about the Tennessee game in round two last year, you think about the Miami game, the Elite Eight, and Rodney Terry's interim season. those games were winnable games,
Yeah.
and you just have to find a way to finish strong. And Texas couldn't. Now, am I saying this Syracuse team is on the same level as Tennessee of last year or Miami of 2 years prior? No. But the principle of looking at yourself and saying, hey, we can finish this game and we can find a way to win. How are we going to find a way to win? That's what impressed me the most about Texas and Syracuse, and really in St. Joe's too. I think they did a better job of it against St. Joe's. But in that Syracuse game, it's one where, I've said this a million times on this podcast. Basketball is a game of runs, and it doesn't, in today's basketball, 20-point leads and that kind of stuff, it's not safe anymore. Because if you go on one 15-5 run or something like that, you find yourself in a 10-point game. And if you go on an 8-0 run, then you're in a 2-point game. So, it's just so tricky to hold leads now in basketball. And, when it's even trickier when you blow that lead to mentally be able to come over that and get on the winning side of it. So that is something that, like you said, Jason, Texas hasn't done in years past and in games past, and now they do it not once but twice. So that's what I like the most from that Syracuse game and from St. Joe's too.
Trey Johnson takes some tough shots, like the 4 of 18 shooting nights. You don't like to see that, but I think that we're gonna end up getting past that pretty soon here. Like he got those out of his system. I understand he takes low quality shots. He's not going to be hitting above 50% most of the time, but for the most part, he's going to shoot better than that. And for Texas to end up pulling out a win in a game where by far their best scorer doesn't do, what he has done all season, I think is something very impressive. Arthur Kaluma has been awesome this year. Like
Yeah.
he's just been so good. Defensively, he has been the anchor. He can guard positions 1 through 5. That has been so helpful. They haven't had somebody like that since Timmy Allen. Offensively, I see a completely different player than the player who I watched the past 3 seasons. He makes good decisions now. He doesn't act like he's a point guard on the perimeter. He makes that extra pass. I think nobody on this team is as bought in as Arthur Kaluma is, from what I can see. He seems very bought in. He seems like he is giving the most effort on defense. His offensive game has been so strong. I love it. Another player who deserves his flowers right now is Julian Larry. What he did in the second half against St. Joe's didn't single-handedly win Texas a game, but without him, they probably don't win that game, or at least they don't win by 9. I mean, Julian Larry did all the little things in the second half. He was attacking the basket. I mean, people forget this is a guy who shoots the ball at a high percentage from everywhere. And so for him to be really taking that lead dog role when Trey Johnson's not having a big night, and by lead dog, I don't mean that he's taking all the shots. He just has the ball in his hands all the time. And he tends to make great decisions when he has the ball in his hands. And so I think Texas learned, and we all learned on Friday night against St. Joe's, that if you give this guy the ball late in the game in a close game, he's probably going to make the right decision, and it's probably going to lead to good things happening for your basketball team. So don't have enough great things to say. Like Kendall Weaver, we've heard about it now for 2 straight off seasons, the work that he puts in and how he's going to be this guy who really surprises people. And for the second straight season in the early going, he has. Caden Shedrick playing big minutes for him, 25 minutes against Syracuse. And then let's see what he did on Friday night really
24,
quick.
24
24?
minutes. Yeah.
It's way more than he usually does.
Yeah.
So for Texas to get that consistency in the front court from Kaluma and Shedrick, Zirek Onyema has looked really good. Devon Pryor is going to start getting work back into the rotation. Like things are in a great place. I can't imagine that it was anything short of big smiles and champagne on the flight back from Brooklyn. I think that things went great for Texas.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know about champagne, but you're certainly happy. They were very happy in that video they posted on Instagram. I saw that, and
Oh,
rightfully so. If you win one of these early season tournaments, you're putting yourself in a good spot going forward. It's never a bad thing to win any kind of tournament. You just want to win the one in March. Um, you made some really good points. Julian Larry, I think that stretch in the St. Joe's game where he hit back-to-back threes
uh-huh.
when they were just kind of trading buckets. If he doesn't hit those, that's a completely different ball game.
Yeah.
Completely different ball game. So those are two. That's a small moment in the game, but it played a really big part in how the game finished. Um, Derek Onyema, man, I mean, he probably had the toughest 2 points I have ever seen in my entire life. I mean, that dude just grinds. I absolutely love Derek Onyema. Um, can he be trusted to play high minutes? Probably not, just because he's a little bit undersized
Yeah.
and he struggled offensively. But can this guy come in and, just run through somebody's face without fouling and, box somebody out if they need it? Absolutely. This guy might be the toughest guy on the team. And then with Shedrick, you look at the minutes, but with Shedrick, I look at the defense. He has just been fantastic as a shot blocker. And that's always been his game, but he's really stepped it up, I think, this year to start off so far. So, man, if he stays healthy, that's going to be a huge presence on the interior for Texas on defense. And it's something that they've lacked, quite frankly. Now, if they add the rebounding portion of that to go along with the good interior defense, we're talking
Oh,
about a really good team here.
oh man. This is exciting. This is really, really exciting. Like Jordan Pope is starting to pick it up too. And, you hope in some of these throwaway non-conference games you can get Jamie Vincent in there a little bit more. Um, Jason Kent is hurt, wrist injury, and allegedly had a boot on the bench against St. Joe's. I kind of
That
a
adds
weird
up.
situation there. Yeah, yeah, that's
Just missed
Texas
it,
for you.
but
That's Texas for you. But they're kind of in a situation right now where it's like, you can let him rest up a little bit, get
yeah.
healthy. They don't play UConn for another 2 weeks, basically. So just so much good for Texas. They're defending at a high level. They're hitting shots late in the game. And really the element that Trey Johnson gives them that they haven't had in past years. Even that team that went to the Elite Eight 2 years ago, like they did not have somebody who they could confidently give the ball to late in the game and say, okay, lead us to the promised land, give us a dub. And that's Trey Johnson, whether he's going to hit shots on the wing, pull up for a big three, find a good open look, and then, the big icing the game at the line. Um, he is just such a luxury to have in so many
Mhm.
different ways. And I'm glad that the country is starting to catch on. You can throw away the four for 18 shooting performance against Saint or against Syracuse because really what he did against St. Joe's and in his defense and his shot making late in the game, he took over. He pulled up and hit a couple of big shots and took over. That's huge for a freshman. Like Texas just hasn't had a guy like this. They haven't just not had a freshman like this. Like they haven't had a guy like this. And so it's exciting to see it happen on a big stage. And most importantly, it's exciting to see it turn into wins in the early season. Is there
He
anything
is
else that you have, off the top of your head? Any last thoughts on the Legends Classic? Really a wonderful 2 days in New York City for Texas.
Yeah, I'm going to expand on your points on Trey. He is their best player since KD. And
Yeah.
when we look back in this, when it's all said and done, I don't think it's even going to be close. Like the gap, and that's not a slight to any of the guys that Texas has had. I mean, you think about TJ Ford, DJ Augustine, and all those Avery Bradley, those kinds of guys, incredibly talented players, great in the NBA. This kid is different, man. This kid is different. And when you're watching him start to put it all together, I really love how he closed the game against St. Joe's. Like you said, I think he made like 3 straight shots or something to close him out, and he's fired up. He's not one to hold back. At chirping on his way back to the bench, and I love that about him. If you're gonna get a guy who takes 18 shots a game, he's got to have that edge to him. He's got to have that edge. He's got to have that confidence. And you see that Trey Johnson is slowly starting to build that confidence. Now, if the shots start falling too, we're talking about a first, second team All American here. I mean, this kid can do it all. What's shocked me the most is that I didn't think he was as good of a defender as he has been. And I think that his length really plays such a big part
Yep.
in that. We've talked about
Yep.
how he brands himself, the big guard university type stuff. His arms are massive, and he just takes up so much space when he's in his stance that, he doesn't have to do too much to get a defensive impact on the ball. So you add that to everything that he's able to do, and man, it's just really fun. Texas fans, enjoy this season watching him. Enjoy every single game that he gets to suit up because he's gone after this year unless something unbelievable happened.
He's
He is
out.
gone. So
He's
enjoy
out.
every second that you get of Trey Johnson and just kind of enjoy the journey and watching him grow because I think he's going to be really special and do a lot of very special things for this Texas team.
I just want to take a second and say that the staff and the early returns say that the staff nailed the portal this
Absolutely.
offseason. Like they absolutely nailed it between bringing in Larry and Kent from Indiana State, the late addition of Arthur Kaluma. We haven't seen Tremont Mark even yet, but to see him get more run in that second game against St. Joe's, I think was really good because you want him to start getting a little bit more comfortable. He's going to be one of their primary shot takers and shot makers this year. And so for him to start getting more in the mix is big. And Jordan Pope is starting to get going too. That's something else that I mentioned. Malik Presley is really the only guy, and he's taking a redshirt year. So
Yeah,
we're going to get to see with him what the staff can actually do when they redshirt someone and develop them. We haven't seen that yet with Texas. So I think that that's actually a pretty exciting angle of this year's portal class. But I just wanted to say the staff killed it in the portal. The early returns are great. Texas is rolling. I don't care about the AP poll, top 25, whatever, but I think it's pretty safe to say that Texas is one of the 25 best teams in the country right now. And a little bit more to your point on Trey, he's been the best freshman in the country. Like
100%.
Cooper Flagg's been good, and Ace Bailey's starting to really get going, and you have some other guys who have really been showing out. But Trey is the best freshman in the country right now, based on the stat sheet and the game impact. I just think has went such a long way, and I'm so excited. We'll talk a little bit to wrap up the show about what Texas has coming up here, but in about 2 weeks they have a big stretch against, or it'll be a week. They have a big stretch against NC State on the road and then UConn, and I'm thinking that could be Trey Johnson's message, his coming out
His
party to the
legacy
world.
game, yeah.
Yeah, of hey, I'm going to be a top 5 pick this summer. So Texas coming up. They've got Delaware State. I mean, come on. Like, I hate these games.
You want to talk about legacy games? That'll be a Trey Johnson legacy game for the first 15 minutes.
Like, Tommy, they could start Cole Bott and Preston Clark, and they're still going to win by 15. Like, these games are
Oh
so
man.
pointless. And it's like, good for the Delaware State guys for getting to come to Austin and get paid for this. But I mean, come on, like play Rice for the love of God, or play Texas State. Like play a team with a pulse. Like I can't stand these games. And then they play NC State and UConn, and then they're eating cupcakes for the rest of December. So it's a good spot for Texas right now. Like it's tough not to feel good. I always say with these games, like against Delaware State and stuff, like you just hope that no one gets hurt, and that they can make good decisions and no one gets angry and whatever. But that was such a great 2 days in New York between Trey Johnson overcoming the rough night against Syracuse and then shooting above 50% against St. Joe's, and it was a different player both nights too who really helped them get the win. I'd say it was Kaluma the first game and Larry the second game. And
Yeah.
that's going to be this Texas team. And we're going to draw so many parallels to the squad this year. I already know it, but that was that Elite Eight team in 22 to 23. It was a different player every night. They
Yeah.
won. Some nights they dominated, some nights they scraped by, but every night it was a different guy. And then once you got to March, Dylan Dessou exploded and Serge Jabari Rice is blowing his hand and stuff like that. That's this year's Texas team. And Trey Johnson's going to be in the middle of everything. Tremont Mark's going to start being in the middle of everything as he gets ramped up. But to see them start to click and the players like Kent, Larry, Kaluma, Pope buying into their roles, man, it's a good time to be a Texas basketball supporter. It really is.
Yep, and I will add this. I'm going to go back to the point you made earlier where you said the staff nailed the portal because they did, and it's going to really look like it when Tremont Mark gets back up to speed. He's fully
Yep.
healthy and he's playing. And yet, still, people still want to fire Rodney Terry. What are we doing here? Folks, what do you want this man to do? Do you just want him to lose the games? I mean, what I see all the time, fire Rodney Terry, fire Rodney Terry. Why? What has Rodney Terry done to prove that he doesn't deserve this job? When you give me actual reasons as to why Rodney Terry does not deserve to be the head coach of the University of Texas, then we can have a conversation about it. Right now, he hasn't done that. They're 5-1. They just won the tournament. What more do you want him to do? Okay. He lost the opener against Ohio State. Oh man, I mean
Oh,
that's there ends their season. What are we doing? Like, just be serious for the first time in like 15 seconds. Because here's the thing too, there is not as much money going into Texas basketball as there are other programs.
not at all.
If Texas wants to get serious about basketball, they got to open their pocketbooks to help
Yeah.
Rodney Terry out. Because if that happens, then you're talking about a program that can be a dynasty in terms of making it to the tournament and making it deep into the tournament. But if
Uh-huh.
people want to say fire Rodney Terry, that's great and all. It doesn't change the problem. So you can bring in whoever you want. If Texas fans aren't going to put money into the program, then nothing's going to change. So I know I go on like a Ronnie Terry rant every week, but it's just so ridiculous that people think that this man doesn't deserve his job when he has done nothing but prove that he is worthy to be there at this point in time.
I completely agree with that, Tommy. Like, I know I went on the record. I predicted that Scott Drew's going to be the Texas coach after this year, but I think so far so great for the staff.
Yeah.
They got the John Clark commitment. They finally get a 25 kid. Like, thank the Lord for that. And on the court, things are going pretty well too. The transfers are balling. What Trey Johnson is doing right now is also great for recruiting because now when Texas tries to recruit these alphas, especially from the Dallas area, the area that has kind of been their vice, so to speak. They haven't been able to pick up, big players from there. This is really sending a message to the amateur basketball world, and I think that that's a great message for Texas, and that's a message that won't be fully heard if Rodney Terry's not here next year. So so far he's been doing great. The one thing that I want to touch upon, we're not going to do like a game preview against Delaware State 'cause, like, it's just a stupid game. Like what are we going to preview? Like, seriously, what are we going to preview? The one thing I do want to note though that I do find interesting, Delaware State is like maybe the biggest sub 300 Ken Palm team of all time. Like, they have two guys on the wing, three guys actually on the wing who are 6'8" who play big minutes, and then they have a guy who's 6'10" and a guy who's 6'11" who both play more than half the game. That's more than is the standard for a team like Delaware State coming out of, I think they're out of the MEAC. And so um I think that we'll see how Texas tries to counteract that. Are they gonna go with guard scoring? Like, the only like conclusion, not conclusion, but the only like thing that we can maybe draw from this game against Delaware State, we might get a little taste of the rotations that they're going to use in SEC play, because even though Delaware State is terrible, they amazingly do have size that is somewhat comparable to the SEC. I can't believe I'm saying that, but they actually do. They have pretty good size, and I think that we'll see how Texas tries to counteract that, and maybe it'll be a little peek into what they're going to do come January.
Yeah, and it's always good to have that kind of matchup. And honestly, as happy as I am that Texas, won this and played St. Joe's in the second round, I kind of wanted them to play Texas Tech just so we could get a gauge as to where this team is at when it comes to defending size. I
Yeah.
mean, you look at the Red Raiders, and there's a guy over there. His name's JT Toppin. Texas really wanted him. He would have been really nice to have, and he's playing really good basketball right now. So how do they defend a type of player like that? Because those are the kinds of players that have come to bite them back in the past, whether it be in conference play or in March or conference tournaments, whatever you want it to be. So, The size is there for Delaware State. The talent is not, and that's where Texas comes into play. And Trey
Yeah.
Johnson, does his thing early. But I've been harping for this all year. I want this to be a Jamie Vincent game. I just want to see what I want to see where he's at. I want to see where he's at, and I want to see how much he can contribute this year, if at all, because
Yeah.
his size and his height specifically is so big if they can use him. Because Texas hasn't had that size in a very long time, and they don't typically recruit size, but he's got it. So what can you do with it? That's what I would want to see in this game.
You want a big Jamie Vincent game, and I got to raise you a Nick Cody game now that we know that he's playing. I want to see how healthy Nick Cody is. I want to see him stretch the court a little bit. I want to see what he can do. I think it's exciting with him being in the mix, and Vincent's going to play against Delaware State. That's a guarantee unless something crazy happens, and then we'll get to in our next show, the NC State and the UConn games, which I think are going to be real previews into the Texas that we're going to get in conference play. If the Texas that we got in New York City is the Texas that we're going to get in conference play, man, this is going to be a fun winter of talking basketball. You mentioned JT Toppin. I understand he's a national breakout candidate. We've got JT Toppin at home. His name's Arthur Kaluma, and he's been playing great basketball.
That's very true.
So things are going great for Texas. It's always a pleasure talking hoops, and especially when the wins are coming. Like, you got to talk about the bad stuff, when they don't win, when they don't, pick up a big recruit, or they miss on a transfer doesn't pan out. Like, you got to talk about that stuff, but there's nothing more fun than when the team's winning, the staff is right. We can talk about good, positive basketball. Like, I'm just glad that we can kind of enjoy that for this episode, and pending whatever the hell happens, this December and afterwards. So that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you to everybody at home for tuning in. We'll be joined again by Zach Davis for our next show. But for now, on behalf